people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It was announced earlier today that Most Valuable Promotions has gone ahead and picked up WBA lightweight champion Stephanie Han. The official statement reads, MVP is proud to welcome undefeated WBA lightweight world champion Stephanie Han, 10-0 with 3 KOs, to the squad. The El Paso native, full-time police officer, and former pageant queen joins MVP's stacked roster after a dominant knockout win to claim the vacant title. A proud Korean-American and devoted mom of 2, Han's story is one of power, purpose, and perseverance. With MVP behind her, she's ready to inspire millions and make history at 135 pounds. Stephanie herself, reacting to the news, said, excited to officially be signed with MVP. MVP is taking women's boxing to the next level, and I'm proud to be part of this dream team. I'm proud to represent my city of El Paso, not just as a champion, but as a mother and a police officer, and to now be part of a movement that is changing the game. The future is bright, and we're just getting started. Stephanie's story is a feel-good story, because how many boxers would have made it this far going pro at age 31? She debuted as a professional roughly 4 years and 10 fights ago, and she has managed to get a lot done in the last 4 years in spite of being a full-time cop and a mother of 2. And as a side quest, just moonlighting as a boxer, she managed to win a world title. She comes from a fighting family. Her older sister, Jennifer Han, was once IBF featherweight champion. Fighting is in the Han blood. So what can MVP do for Stephanie? At 34 years old, unbeaten, WBA champion, they have several options for her. I mean, they could set her up with a fight against Holly Holm. If Holly Holm wins her big comeback fight, they can do that in-house because they signed them both. They can set her up with Holly. They can set her up with Alicia Baumgartner. Alicia, who's set to return to action very soon against Jennifer Miranda. I anticipate she's going to win, and if she does, there's not much reason for Alicia to stay at 130. She could move to 135, and she could fight Stephanie Han. Another in-house fight. They could set her up with Holly Holm. They could set her up with Alicia Baumgartner. They could set her up with Amanda Serrano. Win or lose in the Katie Taylor trilogy. If Amanda wins, I don't think she's going to stick around much longer, and even if she does, I don't think she's going to stay at 140. I think she would elect to move down. Win or lose. If she wins, I think she would move down. If she loses, I think she would move down. Fight Stephanie Han for the WBA title at 135, maybe retire a champion. And MVP can do all of this in-house. Outwardly, they could set Stephanie up with Terry Harper. Terry's not otherwise preoccupied with anything. MVP is not above borrowing other fighters that are with other promotional outfits for their shows. And they could do a fight between Terry and Stephanie, a unification match. So believe me when I tell you that Stephanie Han has a lot of options, and MVP can do a lot for her. Careful they don't end up signing Terry Harper. At the rate that they're signing these female fighters, we don't know what the status of Terry's deal with Matchroom is, if there even is one, as her last fight was not on a Matchroom show. Maybe she's not with them. Maybe Terry ends up at MVP alongside Stephanie. A lot could happen. Back over to Stephanie, they can do a lot for her. She's hot. But now for the caveats. Even though Stephanie's story is a feel-good story, there are some realities to be addressed that All those aforementioned fighters, aforementioned options for Stephanie, every single one of those fighters is a more experienced and dangerous fighter than Stephanie. While Stephanie has managed to get a lot done in the last 4 years and 10 fights, in terms of quality of competition, it really is night and day between her and the aforementioned fighters. Any one of those fights with those aforementioned fighters would be a huge step up, and I mean huge. Grand Canyon. Massive. I like Stephanie, and I admire what she's managed to do, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that I liked her chances in those fights with Alicia Baumgartner, with Amanda Serrano, Terry Harper. Those are dangerous fights for Stephanie Hahn. She's never been in there with fighters of that caliber, not in a boxing ring. Stephanie had a fight on schedule set to go down next month. I forgot against who. It was supposed to be a King's Promotion show. That fight has now been removed from BoxRec's schedule. I can only deduce that MVP might look to add Stephanie's next fight to one of the shows they have coming up. Maybe on a prelim card, just to keep Stephanie active and get her out there. And perhaps for more money than she originally stood to make, en route to something bigger later on in the year. The silver lining is that Stephanie now stands to make more money in her next 2 or 3 fights than she stood to make as is. Win or lose. More money than she was already making, doing what she was doing. More money than a cop makes in El Paso, Texas. Men's cruiserweight news. David Benavidez on a possible Jai Opetaia showdown. Let's make the fight happen. That sounds good. But in reality, he's currently in negotiations for a Callum Smith fight, which I'm not against, by the way. So any idea that we're going to get Benavidez versus Opetaia in the near future isn't likely. Jai Opetaia is a scary man, but there's something about that overarching fear that Benavidez loves. So far, 2025 has been incredibly kind to him. With 6 months remaining, the 29-year-old has already grabbed 2 stoppage victories, one against David Naika and the other last weekend against Claudio Sequeiro. Both were spectacular. The latter was supremely violent. His Aussie fans stood on their feet and roared as Opetaia, 28-0 with 22 KOs, defended his Ring Magazine and IBF title via 5th-round stoppage. Like most of his matchups, Opetaia dominates, and to no one's surprise, he called out unified champion Zurdo Ramirez immediately after. Currently, though, it may not be realistic, having unified the WBA and WBO titles with a grueling 12-round decision win over former champion Chris Billum Smith back in November, Ramirez returns with a June 28th date lined up with former champion Uniel Dorticos, a former champion himself, and Zurdo's mandatory challenger. To make matters worse, Zurdo seems to be in the running for a potential Jake-Paul fight. You heard that right. It's between him and Badu Jack. As Jake Paul is revealed, he is now in negotiations with cruiserweight world champions Badu Jack and Zurdo Ramirez for his next fight. If you're Zurdo Ramirez and you have to choose between Jai or Jake, what do you think Zurdo is going to choose? Jai Opetaia's only hope would have to be that Zurdo isn't Jake's first choice, because there is also Badu Jack, who's in his early 40s. But do remember that Zurdo Ramirez's next fight is on the undercard of Jake Paul's next fight, and that's not for no reason. The dance floor can get a bit lonely without a partner. However, there aren't many cruiserweights in the world willing to jump in there with him. That said, David Benavidez, 30-0 with 24 KOs, has apparently been keeping tabs on him. Their weight classes might be separated by 25 pounds, but the WBC light heavyweight champion isn't exactly concerned about it. Maybe it's because the guy walks around at 200 plus. David Benavidez has been surely, as of late, he's had his fair share of big fights, but also believes he should have gotten a few more. A matchup with Canelo Alvarez never fell in his lap. Also, showdowns against Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev don't have any legs to stand on. That's bullshit. The guy who wrote this article for Ring Magazine, Han Themistode, fails to mention that David is insistent he is a Vegas fighter and he would only fight the winner of that fight in Vegas.
What?
David Benavidez is not the A-side fighter to the winner of that fight to where he can dictate the location and the date of such a showdown, and Hans Themistode fails to mention that, I think deliberately, because it would make David look bad. So when you say that fights with either Artur Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol don't have a leg to stand on, that's not exactly accurate. Those fights are still there. He's the one making it difficult.
I feel like it'd sell more here, to be honest with you. That's the one thing they talk about, like Turkey Al-Rashid, and they say, would you ever fight with them over there in Riyadh? But at the end of the day, all my fan base is here in Las Vegas. I'm a Las Vegas fighter, you know what I mean? I want to stay here.
As David Benavidez's options dwindle down to almost nothing, David is starting to look at the 175-pound division with the same frustration he did when campaigning at 168. If Alvarez, Bivol, and Beterbiev opt for different directions, names like Callum Smith make sense. His choices aren't the best, leading to Benavidez thinking outside the box. When Opetaia recently steamrolled his man, Benavidez cheered loudly. Moving up to the cruiserweight division might feel a bit premature, but if a matchup with Opetaia can become a reality, Benavidez is all for making it happen. So he says, "Let's make this fight happen," Benavidez wrote on his social media account. Failure to secure the Callum Smith fight, that is still in negotiations as we speak, could result in David accelerating his plans to move up to cruiserweight, because it feels like an eventuality. They've been eyeing a Zurdo Ramirez fight since November of last year. This was just one fight into David's light heavyweight campaign, and before he even shared the ring with David Morrell, they were already thinking about moving up to cruiser to fight Zurdo. Hans Themisto didn't mention that in his article. Moving up to cruiser feels like an eventuality for David, and that's the moral of the story. And that is with or without a Callum Smith fight. I've long maintained that I don't think David is going to spend a lot of time in the light heavyweight division. Moreover, I don't think he really wants the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev. There are so many ways this could break down. What if Jake Paul actually gets Zurdo Ramirez in the ring? That would leave Badu Jack free to either fight Jai Opetaia or David Benavidez. They're both WBC champions, David at light heavyweight and Badu at cruiser. And the same applies to Badu. If Jake Paul chooses to fight Badu, well, that would leave Zurdo free to either unify with Jai Opetaia or defend his titles against David. Could happen that way, though in either scenario, Jai Opetaia does not seem anybody's first choice. Now, David says that he's willing to fight him, but David says a lot of things. This is what he said about a Bivol versus Beterbiev trilogy right before their rematch.
How confident are you, David, that you will fight the winner of Beterbiev Bivol?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. To be honest, the only thing that I'm thinking about is that if Bivol wins this fight, like what they would have to do a rubber match. You know what I mean? And like I'm just like thinking, who am I to say that they can't fight another fight because they've fought two great fights.
You heard him. That's not me paraphrasing or connecting the dots. He made it seem like he wouldn't want to stand in the way of a third fight, so that he could then afterwards go through the WBC to pick up a vacant title. And so that guys like Hans Themisto could make it seem like he's being avoided when even he knew there would likely be a trilogy if Dmitry wins, and according to him, he wouldn't stand in the way. That's what he said. So when he now says that he's willing to fight Jai Opetaia and make the fight happen, it's just more of the same from David. I think that a move to cruiserweight for David Benavidez is an eventuality, but that doesn't necessarily speak to Jai Opetaia and a fight with him. As it stands, Jai Opetaia isn't anybody's first choice. And because he isn't, unless it's a unification match, he should stay in Australia, continue to grow his grassroots fan base down there, defending the IBF title in mandatory and voluntary situations. You can't really get mad when he fights the likes of a David Naika or a Sequeyo, because nobody's in a hurry to fight him. David says he is, but talk is cheap. The most that Jai can do is stay active, stay busy, and in the first 6 months of this calendar year, he's racked up not one, but 2 highlight reel knockouts, with enough time left to rack up 2 more. So, unless it's a unification match, unless it's for a big fight, stay in Australia, Grow your fan base down there. Like Tim Tszyu did, where the audience is not as demanding that you face a specific kind of fighter, a specific kind of opponent. Continue to grow your following while you wait for the big fights to roll around. And David, I don't know what to tell you. He can say that he wants the fight, but saying it and actually wanting it are mutually exclusive. In men's heavyweight news, veteran fighter and Hall of Fame inductee Froch reacted to the upcoming Dillian Whyte versus Moses Itauma fight, saying, "Dillian Whyte, I think, is about finished. He's about to fight Moses Itauma as well. I think Moses is going to absolutely outclass and probably flatten Dillian Whyte, and that'll be the end of him." That's how most people are reacting to that fight. They think that Moses is going to flatline Dillian Whyte. Even though it feels like Dillian has fallen out of the public spotlight, he has been fighting. He fought 2 times last year. He's currently on a 3-fight winning streak, and he fought 2 times last year in 2 tune-up fights, 2 gimme fights. Didn't look fantastic doing it, but still, he hasn't been inactive, and he was actually supposed to box on the undercard of Whartley versus Hooney, but he withdrew from that fight so he could fight in this one. 37 years old, 17 years older than young Moses Itauma. The saving grace for Dillian has to be that he may be catching Moses at the most opportune time, because a fighter like Moses is only going to become more and more dangerous the more experience he amasses. So going in, Dillian is the more experienced fighter of the two, and even though he has 3 recorded losses, those have only been losses to top shelf, top tier, top level heavyweights. Anthony Joshua, Alexander Povetkin, Tyson Fury. He's got 34 fights total to Moses Itauma's 12. And Moses has not seen anybody like Dillian Whyte yet. Who's the hardest puncher that Moses has fought so far? I heard a sobering take from Boxing Beats and Rhymes, who seems to be giving Moses the edge, but he doesn't think it's going to be a cakewalk like everybody else. Dillian Whyte's experience level is a factor, but then again, so is Moses' sharpness and hand speed, foot speed, because he's not just beating these guys with brute force, he's beating them with accuracy, with boxing, with movement. Now, many view Moses Itauma as the leader of the new school in the heavyweight division, more than they viewed Johnny Fisher or Fabio Whartley, Jared Anderson, Richard Torres. This kid looks like he's the flag bearer for the new era, the new crop of heavyweights that has sprouted. Moses seems the most talented. This is his first legitimate acid test, because as good as he's been looking, he's only been winning the fights that he's supposed to be able to win. You know, Marius Vach, Dempsey McKean, Mike Balogun. There's nothing wrong with those fights, by the way. Fighting those kinds of fighters in your first 12 pro fights, there's nothing wrong with it, but you know what kind of fights those are. Those are bring-along fights. Those are developmental fights, whereas now he's fighting somebody who's been around the block, somebody who's won some fights, lost some fights against good fighters. Very, very good fighters. He's beat some good fighters. He's been beat by some good fighters. I imagine that Frank Warren must have had to pay a pretty penny to get Dillian Whyte to withdraw from the Hooney versus Whartley undercard to take this monster on. That was likely going to be another tune-up fight, where this one is set to go down towards the end of the summer. And in spite of all of Dillian's professional experience, I don't actually like his chances. The word is out on Dillian Whyte's kryptonite. Every single time he's lost, it's been by way of knockout. And every single one of those knockouts, you can believe this, was off of an uppercut. Dillian Whyte is a sucker for an uppercut. Moses has got to know that, and that will likely be Moses' weapon of choice.